All right, so welcome to the Ask Nato channel, where I talk about cybersecurity things on YouTube so that I can help educate people about the industry and help people figure out how they might get jobs, things of that nature. So here today, we're speaking with Nadean Tanner. Nadean Tanner is someone who is very important in my life. She's one of my favorite people on the planet, but then also she is the author of a couple of books, including one that I use for anyone who I'm teaching and for just reference purposes, called the Cybersecurity Blue Team Toolkit, which we will be talking about. But before we talk about some of that, I would like to first start by asking a few questions to Nadean so you guys can all learn more about who Nadean is and all that good stuff. So first and foremost, go ahead and introduce yourself, Nadean, and I'll have a few questions for you.
Okay. Well, welcome to NATO's show. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been in IT for a little over 20 years now. I started out learning the very basics and finding my niche. I love teaching. I love writing. I love being an engineer. I started my career thinking I was going to make a difference, and I finally got that chance, I think, in writing the book. And my career has grown organically. It's been a series of, "Ooh, that looks interesting. I think I can do that." And it's a never-ending, always learning type of job. I am currently the senior manager for technical education programs at Puppet, for Puppet Software. Prior to that, I was at Rapid7 for about 4.5 years, and I was their lead instructor. So I taught everything from vulnerability management to Metasploit, probably my favorite thing to teach. And I've taught for RSA. I've taught for the Department of Defense. But I met Nate working for a SIM, and he actually sat in front of me in one of our training classes, and I threw spitballs at him.
Those were good days. I just remember being in that class.
You remember that?
Everyone was in there. I'll ask other people if I can interview them and stuff like that. I'll get some of those people from those days in here sometime. Yeah. It's so much fun. So we met a lot of great people through the years. Mm-hmm. And then even after both of us moved on from the job that we were working at the time, there are people who you meet in your life who, you just connect with, like family and stuff like that, and you just stay in touch. And it's just, everyone makes friends and stuff like that, and they're the ones who we get to know the best. So I was wanting to ask you, how long have you been in the industry overall? I guess since, even though technically cybersecurity hasn't been the same quite some time ago since you were in it, but let's start talking about that, because
I think you just called me old.
Yeah.
Dang. Well, I started off in the late 90s, and it was just kind of an evolution of, I started with a degree in marketing, actually. Put myself through school dealing, and normally I have to qualify that and say I was dealing blackjack, craps, roulette, baccarat for a casino, and it put me through school. And so when I did finally complete my education, I went to work in the marketing department, and we were tracking a budget of about 1.5 million on paper. And it was like, no, no. So I built an Access database, and the CEO walked by and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I told him, and he was like, "Could you teach us how to do that?" And I was like, "Sure." And I'd already been training for them. I'd already been a teacher. I had taught people how to deal craps and deal roulette and deal blackjack. And I had taught swimming lessons in college. I was a lifeguard. And so teaching has always kind of come naturally. I like knowing, as much as I know, and then passing that on. So I worked for Gateway Country, and that was my first real job after the casino. I'd walked in, and again, it was just kind of like an accident. The store manager and I had gone to church together when we were little kids, and I was like, "Oh, Craig, how are you doing?" And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm teaching." And he's like, "Oh, well, we need," and it just kind of started from there. I became their instructor, ended up having 3 states worth of Gateway Country stores that I taught for. And it just kind of snowballed. I had somebody sit in my class who was the president of a board of directors, and then he brought his wife to the next class, and then the next class was like full, but I didn't know that they all knew each other. Turns out he had brought the entire board into my classroom, and then went back to the university and said, hire her. And they said, well, we haven't hire her. And so they made it impossible for me to say no. So I taught for about 6 years at LSU, and had somebody in one of my classes working for Rockwell Collins, and they had difficulties creating the technical orders for the B-52 simulator program. And so that's where I got my clearance. That's where, I went in as a kind of a consultant in the very beginning, became a full-time employee, and was still able to teach part-time at night. So it's just kind of been this organic of meet people, you meet your tribe, you meet the people that you fall in love with, that become, best friends. And it's, they think of you when they've got a training need. And it's just kind of been one of those that, I just go in and do what I do.
It's Nadine's fault, or camera's all backwards. It's Nadine's fault that I started getting into teaching in the first place, because Nadine makes teaching fun. Because you talk to other people and they're like, oh, I don't like teaching and things. But then Nadine's like, oh, I was teaching this one class, and you're like, oh, I want to go teach. This sounds so exciting. So here I am. I teach too. And even though I'm an engineer at heart and I like to build things, and I do, and I've done a lot more product development, it's really a lot of Nadine's influence where I'm like, oh, and I really have found a lot of enjoyment for teaching. And it's one of the things that drew me over to the YouTube channel, because, professionally, most of what I do professionally is more engineering, development, building things. But, and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to teach. And then I started teaching on YouTube, and then people started reaching out to me, and it really does work that way. You start teaching, people are like, hey, you teach, you want to come over here and teach? Wait, what, me? Oh, okay, yeah, sure. It's so funny. So another question I have, because you have been around, 10 years ago, what was cybersecurity like? I guess because it would be like 2010 at that point, which I guess I was even in cybersecurity at that point. So maybe let's go 15 years ago. What was cybersecurity like 15 years ago when I wasn't in it?
Let's see. There was the Intel Pentium 5. Going back that far, I wasn't in cybersecurity 15 years ago. I was really more operational. And so it was building the things, fixing the things. It was, replacing motherboards. It was, getting my fingers dirty with thermal paste, replacing CPU. It was imaging machines, and security kind of grew out of a need because, things just started snowballing with the invention of cloud, with just the evolution of cyber as a whole. And it was one of those things I can remember sitting at my desk thinking, why do we need a hash? What is a hash, and why would we need a hash? It's just one directional, and so a one-way encryption methodology. Why would we need that? And then realizing in what places you actually use that kind of technology, it was like, oh, that's cool. I could use that. And then it just kind of, for me, I remember buying, golly, talk about date myself. I can remember freshmen in high school buying punch cards because, we had a Fortran mainframe, and, working on the very first Apple IIs. There was no cybersecurity then. It was, let's see if we can make this work. And then making it work. And it wasn't until there were repercussions because people were stealing the things that you had to worry about passwords and things like that. I remember my very first Yahoo password was 3 characters. So, yeah, I've been around that long.
Times definitely. It is interesting thinking about, even in the past decade, because I don't know, from 2010 and on, just watching things go from malware. Even when I first started in malware analysis, I made minimum wage doing malware analysis in 2009, like literally minimum wage. And so I was like, what a useless skill. Like, why would anyone need to learn this? You can't even make any money doing this stuff.
So, and now it's probably the most in-demand skill set that you could possibly have.
I know, it's so funny, and it really impacts how you think about your own skills and stuff. So I guess because that answers a lot of things too, because it really has evolved over the years. And some things that kind of segues into how would you predict that cybersecurity is what are some predictions you have for the industry, I guess, in general for cybersecurity for the future?
For blue team or for red team? Which side of the equation? I've always, even when I was red teaming, I was still on the blue team. It was seeing how people think, and just knowing that what we do will always be evolving. It's as I've gotten better, as I've gotten more technical, it's interesting to see, the evolution of the hacktivist, the nation states, the target has gone from, from the Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies to the mom and pop store down the street. It's interesting to me to see how people will target the weakest link, which of course is going to be, the human element. You can do everything right. I told this story not too terribly long ago. I was at the EC Council's, it was in Atlanta, EC Council's hacker conference. And I got a phone call, and it was my credit card saying, Miss Tanner, did you just spend $4,000 worth of lumber in Bogota, Colombia? It's like, no, no, that wasn't me. But we actually have a dairy here in Erie that delivers milk to the house, milk, cottage cheese, butter, peaches in season. And they're the only company I used a specific credit card with. So I did everything right. They're the ones that got compromised. And so seeing that evolution of a little bitty teeny tiny dairy get pwned, and because their security isn't set up as well as it could be, there are repercussions. There were, So as far as predictions, I think that we will get more automated. I have to say that I work for Puppet. No, seriously, I really do think that that's what kind of drew me to Puppet. There's a tool that we have called Remediate, and after teaching vulnerability management and expose Insight VM for 4 years, for Rapid 7, people would ask me in class, what's next? And I told them that I believe one day there will be a tool that will not only scan your network, tell you what you've got, tell you where you've got it, what are the vulnerabilities on those systems, but there will be a button one day that you can click and it will patch all the things. And that's what Remediate does. And when I saw that tool, I thought, I predicted this. And so it's kind of cool to get to work with the creators of that software and see how it works under the hood. And then bring the expertise of, I've taught thousands of people how to do this. So this is what people ask in class. This is what the customers are looking for. This is what, enterprises need. Because finding good cybersecurity talent is extremely difficult. So you've got to maximize your time. You've got to maximize those resources and again, automate what you can. Those things that become mind numbing. Because I can remember back in the day being a vulnerability management manager, using a different tool and running those scans, running the patches, running that vulnerability scan against a machine. And then the very next day you come in and it's like, okay, well, it's all a manual process. Let's figure out what took, what didn't take, DAME into the machine, RDP into the machine, run the KB. Did it fix? Nope. Okay, bring the machine in. So, that mind numbing, repetitive, over and over and over type stuff, we've got to find a way around it. Because again, finding good people is hard.
Yeah, it's true, and it's kind of interesting because my channel's been about developing talent, and so you get to meet so many people, and one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time on, especially since people come out and ask all these questions and whatnot, is it's so hard with anything that's new, and cybersecurity being such a new industry that everyone's like, well, what do I even need to know? But then it is really hard to also find the right talent too, because you might find someone who'd be an awesome red teamer and not understand enough cybersecurity, and then recommend they go apply to something that's a blue team type job. They get that job and they're bad at it, but then they do a pen testing job and they're good at it. And that's another challenge, because it's such a vast industry where, like, why did I end up in SIM? I was thinking about that as, and this is for my audience, it's like, why did I end up in SIM? Is I was so general that I wasn't very good at just about anything for the longest time. But I was so general that I got into something called SIM, which means that, like, I know Python, I know PowerShell, I know a little bit of everything, but then SIM, you have to be a master of, like, general everything, and then you can do just about anything you want with SIM. But, you know, it's a weird thing, because now I have other people be like, well, should I do Python? Should I? Well, you don't know what you're good at yet if you haven't been messing with things. And a lot of new talent, they just, you know, how do you figure that out? You have to just start trying everything. So for those of you who've been following my channel and you're trying to figure out how do you become that talent, how do you do something, my number one recommendation is just, you want to be a person who tries everything to figure out if something's too hard. That means that you either don't have aptitude for it, you need more training and practice, but try it enough things to see what comes easy to you, and then aptitude's important. So anyways, that's good insights. And one thing I wanted to bring up are the Flamingos, Nadine. If you're, are you willing to talk about the Flamingos?
Sure.
You
Are we talking about the Flamingos?
Because this segues into the book. I'll talk about why Flamingos is. Nadine, she likes to do things. She's just a little bit of an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm an entrepreneur, whether or not. But Nadine likes to make things and come up with things. And once upon a time, it all started with her being herself, and she would do some stuff. I'll let you tell everyone. So
is this about the flocking?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So my mother turned 75. I think it was her 75th birthday, and she loved pink flamingos. And so for her 75th birthday, I bought 75 plastic flamingos, and I flocked her yard. And so she loved it, absolutely loved it, called all of her friends, and everybody was driving by taking pictures of her front yard full of 75 pink flamingos. And so we're standing out in front of the yard, you know, in her yard, laughing about, you know, you're so goofy, and why'd you do that? There was a guy walking his dog, and he gave me his business card, and he was like, my mother's birthday is, you know, I will pay you to come do this. And he goes, well, how much? And I was like, well, how old is she? And he said, well, she's 60. And I was like, $60. It's $1 a flamingo. He was like, done. So it just kind of evolved. And being from Louisiana, born and raised in Louisiana, I ended up with pink flamingos for birthdays. And then I had some black flamingos because, of course, the New Orleans Saints. So I had black flamingos. And it was also kind of appropriate for that over the hill kind of thing. And then purple and gold. I had purple and gold flamingos because, of course, LSU. And I had several times that I started having so many yards to flock that I had to hire people to go, you know, at night, you know, sink in the flamingos in people's yards and then sneak away so that it was a surprise when they woke up in the morning. And yeah, it was a hoot. I left it in Louisiana, sold it to a dear friend, Mary. If you see this, I hope you're still flocking. But yeah, it was a trip. I even, you know, I think Shelby was probably like 5 at the time. There were a couple of times that she would go with me. The flamingos were as tall as she was. And yeah, so it was probably my very first entrepreneurial venture. And yeah, probably at one time, I think I had about 500 flamingos.
And now you have something else that's at people's homes, our books. Yeah. Now that you write, because so let's talk a little bit about the Cybersecurity Blue Team Toolkit, because Nadine comes up with, whether or not she thinks she comes up with good ideas, she comes up with good ideas that everybody wants. Everyone wants to learn from Nadine, even me, because you'll learn so much just by even having a conversation. You're probably learning so much just by watching this interview. So
what not to do.
what drove you to want to start writing? Because it's exciting, but for you, what about writing really just gripped you? You're like, I'm going to write this book.
Well, it's so funny because you just a few minutes ago mentioned, being kind of a jack of all trades. And I really do feel a bit like that, Jane of all trades, master of none. The story is I was in Winnipeg, Canada. I had just finished teaching a 4-day class, and I was coming back through customs, and I put my backpack, on the train thing to go through X-ray, and the guy behind me put his backpack on top of mine. And I know it was now I know it was an accident, but having red teamed in the past, I'm thinking cloner, my American Express card, my passport, everything's in that backpack. And I must have given him, the mama look or whatever it was. It was so I grabbed his backpack and moved it, and it kind of rolled over, and it said Wiley. And I had taught from Wiley curriculum when I worked for the Department of Defense, Cybex, the A+, Net+, Security Plus, all the way up to CISSP. I had taught from their curriculum. I had Wiley books I taught at LSU. And so it's like, oh, I know you. And so again, struck up a conversation, ended up going through customs, and he gave me his business card and I gave him mine. We talked about, books and all that kind of fun stuff, what I did. And he ended up giving my card to one of the associate publishers, and who reached out over LinkedIn. And I thought it was spam. I didn't pay any attention to it. And, just, conversation, somebody I don't know, click. And then they were a little tenacious. I ended up getting a phone call. And Jim, my publisher, said, we would like for you to write a book on Metasploit. And so at the time, I'm working for Rapid7, and I happened to be on the first name basis with Egypt, James Lee, who is one of the most brilliant brains on the planet, and Sam Huckins and Brent and everybody who was on the Metasploit team. And it was like, no, I'm not writing that book. I'm not putting that book in front of David Kennedy. I know the SME. I know the subject matter expert. That's not me. Thank you very much. And so he said, you're welcome. And if you ever change your mind, let us know. And I was like, no. And then he came back and he goes, well, what would you write about? And I was like, I don't know. And so I talked to my husband, and he said, write the book you needed 10, 15, 20 years ago when you were starting out in IT. And I was like, I could do that, just write about the stuff I do know. And so I did a proposal of about 12 different chapters on Nmap and Metasploit, because, I can teach this much. I can't teach this much, but I can teach this much. And so I just took my favorite tools, my favorite open source tools, my favorite. Yes, you might not deploy OpenVOS in a Fortune 50 company, but it does expose you to vulnerability management as a whole. And so open source, free, fairly easy to use. The free version of Burp Suite, the free version of Kali, all the things that you could download. I wanted to approach the book in a way so that I told you my scenario, why I use it, why it's my favorite, and then turn it into more of a how do you use it, and then almost like a lab. Click here, point here, download it here. This is what you're going to need. Name this file. How to look at a PCAP, how to look at hex, all that kind of fun stuff. And so it took me 6 months to write it. And now that I look back at it, it's almost like childbirth. You forget how painful it was at times. And the kids would go to bed at, 9 o'clock, and then Kenneth goes to bed at 10. And so I'd grab a glass of wine and sit here and write for a couple of hours. And it was kind of funny when some of my best friends read the book. They're like, yeah, I can tell there was probably red wine being drunk right about here. I've had other people say, yeah, it sounds like me when I'm teaching in a real class, but it was fun. And I've gotten some good feedback, but like anything, you go back and read it and go, oh, I could have done it better. Even Meryl Streep says that, she would go back and act differently, and like French Lieutenant's Woman. And that's the best of the best she's ever done. So I look at the book and go, yeah, if I had to do it over again, there might be a couple of changes, but it was, I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that I didn't say no or keep saying no. because it really was an opportunity.
That makes a lot of sense. And a lot of that resonates with me too, because I do the same thing where I'm just like, it wasn't that good. Whatever I made, it's fine. I guess, whatever. But we definitely do that. It's so hard not to. And one reason, some things that I want to say about this book too, once again, it's called the Cybersecurity Blue Team Toolkit by Nadean Tanner. And it looks like so. For those who have never heard of it before. And I actually do quite literally keep this book on my desk, not just out of the fact that Nadean is one of my favorite people, but it's actually very helpful because, especially since I spent a lot of time trying to help people ask me more of the basic questions than the advanced questions. And I actually do better at answering, in some cases, the more advanced questions. And it's so hard for me to answer simple questions for people these days because I think I'm just too far removed from the entry level I'm learning. I'll get these beginners and be like, hey, can you tell me how to, I'm like, oh yeah, just go ahead and break it down into binary and then rebuild it into a different format. And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, wait. So Blue Team Toolkit, it actually is a lot more simple than me. And it's also just a really strong reference point to have. It talks about things like Kali Linux, stuff like, if most people use a Windows computer, and there's all this stuff that you can learn about that. It talks about social engineering, any of the basics that you really need to know if you're trying to just get started with cybersecurity. I had a couple of students I was working with, and I just gave them the Cybersecurity Blue Team Toolkit. And then, one got a job within 3 weeks that I helped out with. And then after getting a job already, was getting another job offer from another company. He was like, can we just bring you in and create a position for you if we like interviewing you? It's like, okay. But this is a person who just read this book, had never worked in cybersecurity before, went and got a little education in cybersecurity. And I mean, it's real stuff, guys. Like, at the end of the day, if you're trying to figure out how to learn some of the things that are just going to get you going, and it's helpful for even me, because there are certain things that I just can't remember. There's so much stuff to remember that I'm like, oh yeah, it's in the Blue Team Toolkit. And right now I'm building some sim stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So it's just a really handy reference to just keep next to you, even after you learn the basics that you're going to forget over and over again forever, because that's how it works. So I did want to say that for anyone who hasn't read the book, that's a very short review for me. Sometime I'll make like a whole video on why it's such a great book, but there's a little bit of it for you there. But that's not even just me just trying to promote Nadean. I genuinely believe that, and I really do actually use the book. If you've watched my videos, there's a reason why it just sits on my desk. So that brings us to and then we'll go ahead and start to wrap this up, because you wrote another book and you've been writing at this point. And so what's the book that you just released? Go ahead and talk about that before we start to close.
So again, it was another very organic conversation. I had taught a Security Plus class in Boston for Rapid 7. They're based out of Boston, and I'd had this idea because a lot of people are pushing the 2020 by 2020 or 50-50 by 2020, where it's so important to have diversity and women in STEM and STEAM and in cybersecurity. And I'll probably not have some favorite people after this, but I find that sometimes they'll count the barista as the female in cybersecurity. And it's like, if I have to explain subnetting to you, if I can't tell you what encryption is, if I say triple des and you look at me like a deer in headlights, you're not in cyber. You're not in cybersecurity. And so it was like, bring in all the women. We're going to do a Security Plus class, and I'm going to teach it for a week. So you'll have 40 hours, get you certified, and pushed into a role that is technical. I want you in a technical cybersecurity role, not just working for a cybersecurity company. And the book was bad. The book was so hard to read and to teach from, and the resources were just. So I called again the publisher, and I was like, "What can I do? What can I do to help?" And I ended up writing a book. And it's basically the practice tests for the CASP, which is the test right above Security Plus. I think I got certified in 2014. I was one of the first people to actually take the beta. And So the Certified Advanced Security Professional certification with CompTIA. I wrote the practice guides. So 1,000 scenario-based questions on everything from encryption to how do you construct a ACL to identifying buffer overflow, SQL injection to CIS controls to whatever's covered on that exam is in that book. And that was it was much harder than the Blue Team book. I have such a healthy respect now for those people that have to write scenario-based questions, 1,000 different scenario-based questions. That was tough. So that one comes out, I believe, in June or July of this year, with the health issues and the COVID-19 setbacks. And I don't know if we're still on the exact same timeline, but I wrote the dedication and the acknowledgments Monday and sent that off to my editor and signed off on the author reviews, and I'm done. And so I'm very excited about that. But back to the Security Plus, the new exam 6 is coming out this year. And Mike Chappell and David Seidel are going to write the new Security Plus book. And guess who gets to be their technical editor? So I'm real excited about that. I told David it's going to be a little like, when Michael Phelps was swimming in the Olympics, they still had a lifeguard there. I have no idea what I can contribute to David Seidel and Mike Chappell, but I'll do my best. But I'll get to technically edit that book when it comes across my desk.
It's so exciting because you put a lot of work into these books, and it shows. And even with like the Blue Team Toolkit, and of course, CASP is a very complicated thing in general. So kudos to that. Very impressive. Well, thank you for everything you do.
What's funny is that, I think, I've got my heroes. I've got the people that I look up to, the Chris Nickersons, Chris Roberts, David Kennedy, Georgia Wyden. I've got the people that I just, go fangirl when I meet, Johnny Long. And I don't know anything. They're the best of the best. And then writing this book is like, I know something. I know a lot about a lot. I'm not a master of anything, but I do know a lot about a lot.
It's true. You do know you know more than you probably think you know. I'll tell you that from knowing you, which is not a bad thing. It's good to know a lot of things. You're definitely very humble, but you also do things, so you don't let it hold you back, which is outstanding. And if you let things hold you back, there's a lot of good in the world that would not be getting done today. So that's something that we can't replace in the world. So at the end of the day, there's a saying that says that you're robbing the community that could be learning from you if you never get out the gate with the things that you know and can share with other people. And you're doing it. And so if it's robbing other people to not share what you know, you're most certainly not robbing anyone. I don't know where that statement came from or where it began. I read it in a book, and it is the book reference that it came from something else. It's an interesting statement. So thank you for doing that. Thank you and I'm very excited about the new book coming up. So because my audience especially are those who very much so benefit from things like Cybersecurity Blue Team Toolkit, and they're trying to get Security Pluses, I made a video about, I have a strange way of studying for the Security Plus and certifications in general. If you want to go and read that book, I am not the best person to ask for recommendations around getting certifications, but Nadine knows a lot more about that sort of thing than I do, and she writes books. So you can just read the books, and that is probably even more guidance than what I could give you outside of what I say. But I am going to still curate some content around the internet to help people as well. But I'll keep everyone up to date on content that's coming out for things like the Security Plus and Nadine's new books and things like that. How can people follow you and follow your releases in social media and things like that? What are your recommended ways for following you?
Well, I think I'm a little too busy. I don't usually Twitter very much, and I'm not on a lot of social media. LinkedIn is my primary contact. That's what I use and what people usually find me on. Students will find me, and that's kind of cool. They'll like, oh, I remember you taught the whatever. So yeah, I would say probably LinkedIn, and my first name is spelled funny. My great aunt was a Nadine, spelled it Dean, and so yeah, I am the only one. My digital footprint is huge, so it's not hard to find me. You can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble. That has been a treat. When the book first came out, I took the kids to Barnes and Noble, and we stood in front of the door. And it's like, all right, whoever finds mom's book first gets to pick where we go for lunch. So, having my book in that type of ecosystem is really kind of flattering. So yeah, I'm in Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to reach out and say, hey, I saw Nathan's podcast, because if I don't recognize your name and we don't have hardly anybody in common, I'll check you out before we become friends. Again, it's that security part that kicks in. So probably the best place to find me if you have any questions.
Well, cool. I'll go ahead and add some links to the description below for people as well, for the ones that she's talking about there. And yeah, and then feel free to ask me questions per usual, because this is the Ask Nato channel. And so you can most certainly ask me questions. And I learned a lot from Nadean myself as well. So if you ever want to ask questions through me to Nadean, I'll see how many answers I can get you. She's very busy, quite literally.
But in a good way.
In a good way. She's doing good work, and I appreciate you, Nadean, and I appreciate you coming on the show and being the first Ask Nato interview. So if you ever want to come back on, we'd love to have you on the channel again. So any last things that you'd like to tell my audience before we end this interview?
Well, just to reiterate what you had said earlier about finding what it is that you're passionate about. There was a meme that I saw not too long ago, and it was all about pen testing. And this guy, or this young child, he had 1 foot on the bottom stair and like 1 foot, like 5 stairs up, wanting to be a pen tester. And he skipped, operating systems and networking and all. You have to put in the work. You have to have passion for it, but you'll find your niche. You'll find what captures you. You'll find the language that speaks to you, no pun intended. Like you said, if it was Python or C or whatever it is, and then pursue it. And I would say make a commitment to learn at least one new thing a day. That's my goal, is that I want something brand new to take to the table. When the kids and Kenneth and I are having dinner, it's like that's one of those conversations that we have. What did you learn today? And sometimes it's something as bizarre as just trivial, but at least one new thing a day.
I think that's a great recommendation. So there you have words of wisdom from Nadean. Learn one new thing a day. And actually, that's outstanding advice. So thanks for the words of encouragement and the words of advice. And everyone, thank you for watching. Have a great one.
Thanks.